We are here to never forget. We are here to never forget. We are here to defend democracy. We are here to, in fact, advance democracy. But we are here to never forget. 1 year ago, on this day, and in fact, this very hour, the full face of the attempted coup and insurrection was visible to all of us on national and, in fact, international TV and other platforms. We are here to make sure that we remind folks that we will never forget, and that we are here to defend democracy, and that, in fact, we are here to advance democracy. We do not lose sight, and I want to make sure that everybody understands this. And Senator Carney, you and I, and a few others, started our morning at the sacred ground of Valley Forge, where this nation was fought and lives were lost to allow it to come into existence. And that journey from Valley Forge takes us to this spot right here, where the articles were written, where the Constitution is defended and celebrated. And I might add, District Attorney Krasner, where the federal court exists, where everybody, no matter what their station is held to be accountable to the fullest extent of the law, no matter their station, no matter their situation. So that's where we started this morning on this historic day. And we're here to hear from folks who have celebrated, defended, and advanced democracy in all forms in their work. Our partners are here, and our colleagues are here. And first and foremost, I'm going to ask Liz Randall from the Pennsylvania ACLU to please step up to the microphone. Liz?
Thank you, Senator Hughes, and everyone who has gathered with us here this afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Randall. I'm the Legislative Director for the ACLU of Pennsylvania. For more than 100 years, the ACLU has defended the Constitution and the fundamental tenets of democracy, among them the right to protest and the right to vote. On November 3rd, 2020, the American people voted in a free, fair, and secure election, and by December 14th, all 50 states had certified their electoral college votes. What happened on January 6th was not a protest. It was a violent attempt to prevent the House of Representatives from counting the state's electoral ballots to certify the winner of the presidential election. January 6th was an attempt to subvert the peaceful transfer of power. It was an attempt to overthrow the legitimate outcome of a democratic election. And it was an action intended to undermine the very foundation of our democracy, the right to vote. The right to vote is not simply the act of registering or casting a ballot. Equally important is the right to have those votes counted and certified. And January 6th was a violent attempt to suppress those votes. We are frequently told a narrative about the history of voting rights in the United States. It begins at our founding when voting was limited to propertied white men who comprised perhaps 6% of the population. But slowly over time, as the story goes, the right to vote has progressively expanded until we've gotten to where we are today. From 30,000 feet, that's not wholly inaccurate. But it omits a critical component. The right to vote has not expanded uniformly over the past 245 years. There have been moments of democratic expansion in this country, and they are always met by the forces of reaction that have contracted the right to vote. Black men were elected to Congress during Reconstruction. Men who just a few years earlier had been considered property were now congressmen and senators. But that incremental expansion, which only applied to men, was followed by almost a century of black codes, Jim Crow, and systemic disenfranchisement of black Americans. The period following the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act saw another expansion of the franchise and participation that resulted in real change at all levels of government. What we have witnessed over the last decade has been a reaction to that expansion. In the 1990s and 2000s, there was little mention of voter suppression. We were focused on motor voter, modernizing our voting systems, and implementing the Help America Vote Act. But for the last 10 years, we have been fighting an onslaught against voting rights unlike anything this country has seen in decades. It's hard to watch the events of January 6th and see them as anything but the next stage of another reactionary movement in this country, a reaction to the electoral consequences of America's demographic changes and the expansion of political activism among communities of color. State legislatures across the country have been busy passing restrictions and erecting barriers to the ballot, bold attempts to limit who is part of the democratic process, how they get to participate, and when their participation counts. And Pennsylvania is no different. Current and former legislators were at the Capitol on January 6th. 64 state legislators asked Congress to reject Pennsylvania's Electoral College votes, and 24 state senators asked the U.S. Supreme Court to block the certification of those same Electoral College votes. Since then, over 50 bills have been filed in the General Assembly that propose changes to our election code that would limit access to the ballot and shift election authority. State legislators have advanced proposed amendments to the Pennsylvania Constitution to change how elections are administered, including two that require voter ID. And we are currently litigating a case in Pennsylvania's Commonwealth Court challenging subpoenas issued by a state Senate committee to collect personally identifying information of millions of Pennsylvania voters in order to conduct a sham election review. The ACLU will continue to litigate, advocate, and push back against discriminatory and illegal voter suppression attempts, and we invite you to join us in the fight for real opportunities that move us closer to an electoral system representative of all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
You got it.
Thank you.
I apologize. Thank you.
We believe in a free press.
That's right. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Representing the oldest civil rights organization in the nation, Kathy Hicks from the Philadelphia NAACP. Kathy?
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Senator Hughes, for allowing me to join you all to speak today. We're in front of the National Constitution Center, and this is a very important day. The world sat in shock and utter disgust on January the 6th, 2021, as we watched hundreds of people storm the Capitol, as we recognize today the one-year anniversary of the day we watched the United States Capitol being overrun by terrorists. Let this day always be a reminder of the battles we continue to fight. It was a wake-up call for the nation that although we have come so far, we have to continue the work of equality and democracy for all. This day will forever be etched as another stain in American history. The day of infamy ignited by the former president who said, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. As African Americans, we dealt with lies for centuries. We were falsely accused of crimes without any consequence to the accuser. And our reputations have been tarnished by racist myths and lies without any consequence to those telling or repeating those hurtful stories. With this, eventually everyone's freedoms erode. We saw that on January 6th of last year. Therefore, this is more than just a battle to protect minority voting rights. It is a battle to defend democracy. The NAACP has long understood it will take all of us working together to win this fight. I wonder what Octavius Cato might think of Philadelphia of 2020. What might he have said as we watched thousands of African Americans stand for hours in lines to vote in November 2020, wearing masks, social distancing, and putting their lives at risk to elect a president during a pandemic? How might we have reacted to the fact that black voters in that year made such a crucial difference in the election's outcome. African Americans had the right to cast those ballots thanks to Octavius Cato and the thousands of everyday warriors who were willing to risk their lives and their livelihoods to register minority voters. Between January 1st and December 7th, at least 19 states passed 34 laws restricting access to voting. More than 440 bills with provisions that restrict voting access have been introduced in 49 states. In 2021 legislative sessions, our right to vote must be protected, and we must continue to stand against those who are working to dismantle those rights. As president of the Philadelphia branch NAACP, we will continue to work to eliminate the racist and unjust legislation that continues to affect people of color throughout the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much. Andrea Custis, the president of the Philadelphia Urban League, couldn't be with us. I know that Dennis and Thomas are here. Thank you. Please acknowledge them and their presence here from the Philadelphia Urban League. Andrea would say, and I think she already gave us directions, to make sure that we remind everyone that this is not just about defending democracy, but it is about advancing voter participation, advancing democracy, getting folks registered, getting folks mobilized, getting folks activated in our democracy, in the laws of this land, and choosing the individuals who make the laws of this land. So, on behalf of Andrea Custis, I'm committing on behalf of Andrea and all of us that we all collectively agree to advance voter registration, and we're going to fully drive that in any way, shape, or form that we can do that. So, please let Andrea know that I did what she told me to do. Please, thank you, because I don't want to get in trouble with Andrea. From the New Pennsylvania Project, she just walked on the scene from the New Pennsylvania Project, Kadita Kenner. Kadita?
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Good afternoon, members of the Free Press. Love to see you out here.
That's right.
All right. My name is Kadita Kenner. I'm Executive Director of the New Pennsylvania Project. We are a voting rights organization with a primary purpose of voter registration. And it is our mission in 2022 to register at least 50,000 new voters in the Commonwealth.
There you go.
This is how you expand democracy. This is how you defend democracy. You involve more people in the electorate. Pennsylvania has more than 1.1 million eligible folks who are not registered to vote, who need to be registered to vote. That includes 20% of all eligible black folks here in the Commonwealth, 31% of the Latinx community, 42% of the eligible AAPI community as well. We have work to do. We're standing across from the National Constitution Center, and so I would be remiss if I did not mention the attacks on our judiciary here in the Commonwealth. We have lots of different ways in which we try to engage in gerrymandering. We do that politically, racially, prison, and judicial. We must ensure that we stop these attacks on our independent judiciary. We must ensure that we defend democracy by expanding the electorate, bringing more people into the process. As we knock on doors across the Commonwealth, Norristown, Chester, Coatesville, Harrisburg, Carlisle, Penn Hills, Monroeville, the same common thread is being seen as we knock on doors to talk to folks, is they want to be part of this electorate, but they also want a government, and they want political parties to work for them in their best interest. We must defend democracy on this day. I think about where I was on this day last year. It was a Wednesday. I was hosting a weekly event planning call for an organization looking to raise the minimum wage, looking to have fair funding in our schools, looking to ensure we can have some free college here for folks as well. And on that Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which you always have that meeting, people were looking at their TVs because we were all stuck at home, right? On Zoom. And they said, Kadita, why are you still holding this meeting? Are you not watching what's going on TV? And I said, absolutely, I'm watching what's going on TV. That's exactly why we need to continue to work. We cannot stop. We know we had a free and fair election here in the Commonwealth and the country in 2020. Same in 2020-21. We'll have the same in 2022. And we'll have more people engaged in the electorate in 2022. We are going to defend democracy by expanding the electorate. Yes. We're going to ensure everyone who is eligible to vote comes out and casts their ballot, not once a year, but twice a year, consistently, creating super voters here in the Commonwealth so that we can all see our needs being met. I'm going to thank the Senator for having me here today, and just know that we're excited for 2022. We're excited for the opportunity to engage Pennsylvanians from all across the state and talk about the issues that matter to them. This is how you get people to turn out. Those who have been functionally disengaged from the process, politically disengaged from the process, we're going to bring them back in. We're going to encourage everyone to come out and cast their ballots. We can have success like they had in Montgomery County. More than 70% of folks showing up in what they consider off-year elections. But we know there's no such thing as an off-year election. Every election matters. Every voter matters. And we're going to make sure that those who are eligible to vote are able to cast their ballots easily and successfully. And we're going to eliminate the barriers. We will not allow for the barriers that are being put in front of voters of the Commonwealth at this moment to take place for 2022. We're going to make sure that we're making voting easier, not harder, particularly for communities of color. We came out in record numbers in 2020. We will do it again in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Kadita. Thank you very much. Expanding the democracy. We have, as we remind folks once again that we started out this morning at Valley Forge, that sacred ground of Valley Forge. And we come down here to this location where we recognize and have at our backdrop Independence Hall, where the articles were written that we have in front of us, our National Constitution Center, where we educate and recognize and celebrate our rights in the Constitution. But we also have, as I said earlier, we also have directly behind us the federal courthouse, where we expect everyone, no matter great or small that they may be, to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. We would ask our prosecutors, now we have two prosecutors here. Hold on, I'm gonna do this differently.
I'm leaving anyway.
You want me to hold it?
No, I'm
Okay, all right, okay. It's Jim Gardner, all right? We have our two prosecutors here from Harrisburg, our State Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, then following Josh is our own Larry Krasner, the District Attorney for the City of Philadelphia. Josh?
Sorry.
I won't bang the podium the way
I know,
Vince did.
right? That's okay, it's broken.
Okay.
All right.
Let me say very briefly, Senator Hughes, it is good to be here, but it's also important that we are here to remember and reflect on that solemn day and dedicate ourselves to doing the work necessary to not forget what happened, but also not forget the unique responsibility we all bear as Pennsylvanians to continue that 245-year experiment that began right here in Philadelphia. The nation looks to us as an example. The nation looks to us to do this work. And this work is more important now than ever before to defend our democracy. You see, you can draw a straight line between the lies, the litigation, the violent insurrection on January the 6th, and the battle that is raging in state capitals across this country today to suppress the vote. But for the veto pen of our governor here in Pennsylvania, we would go the way of Texas and Georgia, states where today it is harder to vote because of the acts of state lawmakers. And understand the reason why some of these lawmakers, the Republican lawmakers, do what they do to suppress the vote. They're doing it to remove certain people from the conversation. They're doing it, Senator, because they don't believe that certain voices get to count in our democracy. They're doing it, to be blunt, to make it harder for black and brown folks to cast their vote and then be at the table of progress in our Commonwealth and in our country. This group that Senator Hughes has assembled here today, coming from all different walks of life, with different responsibilities in both our city and in our Commonwealth, have dedicated themselves, not just today, but every single day, to making sure that the table of progress is set, that it is full, and that we not only protect voting rights in Pennsylvania, but we expand voting rights in Pennsylvania. Our charge as Pennsylvanians, carrying this gift, this responsibility of our democracy, is to continue to do this work, to continue to perfect our union, to continue to reflect on what led up to January 6, 2021, and ensure that it never happens again, to beat back the lies with truth, to hold those accountable who participated in the violent insurrection, and to ensure that the laws of this city, this Commonwealth, and this country are inclusive and respect the will of the people. Thank you so much for your work, Senator Hughes. Thank you to all assembled here today for the work you do. You've got a lot to do, and I'm proud to be in this battle alongside each and every one of you. Thank you.
Our District Attorney, Larry Krasner. Larry?
Thank you, Senator. I think it is very important in times like these that we are as direct as possible, because part of what has happened is the normalization of crazy thought. So let's call this what it is. What happened on January 6th was a bunch of American Nazis tried to overthrow the government of the United States. What do Nazis do? They do racism and they do violence. What does Donald Trump do? He does racism. He encourages violence, and he is the leader of these American Nazis. Now, I say that as someone whose father served in World War II after he volunteered after Pearl Harbor, whose uncle served in German forests and risked his life and came back with scars from that. So I do not call anyone an American Nazi lightly. But we need to call these people and what they did for what it is. We are speaking of people who are un-American. They are not Americans. They would overthrow this government. The way their idea of an election works is this. If you can work with a foreign power to steal it through social media like Donald Trump did the first time, you do that. If you lose the election, you say you didn't. And lo and behold, it turns out the entire Republican Party believes that whenever they lose an election, they didn't. Sound familiar? We need to call this what it is, and we need to speak the truth. An officer lost his life that day. He was hit in the head with a fire extinguisher thrown by a Pennsylvanian. He died the next day defending our Capitol. 4 other law enforcement officers, state and federal, have committed suicide since that time. And in the short aftermath of it, because it was that horrible, it was that awful, it was that traumatic. And yet, this activity is defended by Republicans who claim they stand for law and order. Give me a break. Their favorite guy, their number one guy, Donald Trump, is not just a traitor. He is not just a criminal insurrectionist. This is a man who's got a yellow book of crimes. This is a guy who has a long series of women he sexually assaulted in violation of the law. This is a guy who is pretty obviously a white-collar criminal at many levels. This is a guy who works with foreign powers to whom he is indebted. That is who they are holding up as their fearless leader, these American Nazis. That is who they are holding up to lead their cult. And so it is important to go back to the facts. I was very carefully and intimately involved with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies on Election Day. There was no steal of the election. There's not a single allegation of election fraud that occurred in the city of Philadelphia that was ever taken up by any branch of law enforcement, including the one Donald Trump controlled, the Department of Justice. It is a flat-out lie that there was a steal to this election. But I'll tell you what there was. There were a couple people who tried to make sure the votes weren't counted. Those two people are named Joshua Macias and Antonio Lamada. You may remember when the long and careful count was occurring at the convention center, these two guys thought it made sense to jump in a Humvee, to take their QAnon hat, and to drive up here and get out of their vehicle right by where the votes were being counted, up at about 12th and Arch. And when they did, each one of them had a gun on his hip, and inside the vehicle was an AR-15 with more than 100 rounds. They were arrested due to the good work of the FBI. Among other law enforcement agencies, they were charged by my office. Specifically, they were charged with illegal possession of firearms and with interference with elections, which is a felony, hindering or delaying performance of election duty, a misdemeanor, and conspiracy. They are coming to trial in May. So look for two things in May: an election where you better vote, and look for a lesson for anybody who thinks it's okay to steal our democracy, which is that we have a jail cell for you, and we got a Philadelphia jury who are going to want to know why it is you think your vote should not be counted. Just so we're all clear on the connection between trying to deny the vote, trying not to count the vote, and that insurrection, those two men, Joshua Macias and Antonio Lamada, got out on bail, and they went to the insurrection. They were videoed outside the Capitol giving speeches. One had a walkie-talkie. I'll let you figure out why that might be. They did that while they were on bail on this case. We then went back and tried to get that bail revoked, and it was increased. But they are out today. Well, oh, trust me, when they come to court in May, there will be some justice waiting for them, because every Philadelphian's vote, every American's vote needs to be counted. I don't usually wear cufflinks. I'm not as flashy a dresser as some people, but I wore my cufflinks today. That is my American flag, which I inherited from a relative who passed away. That is my American flag. Show it to a Nazi and make him melt. Thank you. Woo.
District Attorney, how do you really feel? Thank you, Larry. Thank you very much. From the state level, I'm going to have my state colleagues speak for a moment. Senator Tim Carney, who was with me once again out at Valley Forge this morning. I am never going to let folks not remember what occurred there and why it was important that we were there under the direction of Senator Art Haywood. Senator Carney?
Thank you, Vince. It's kind of terrible that we have to be here today. Just want to say that I'm thankful that we got Capitol and Metropolitan Police officers and Capitol staff who, on January 6th, showed their bravery and their sacrifice defending the Constitution and American democracy from violent rioters. I'm mournful for the loss of police officers who died in the line of duty and those whose lives following the trauma of that violent attack. All Americans should support Congress's investigation into the riot's events. It may seem like it was a simple protest that got out of hand, but such an unprecedented attack against the United States government, we need to get to the bottom of the plot to why that happened. If we want American democracy to survive into another century, we can't just roll our eyes and pretend it was just another vulgar Donald Trump rally. We can't condone political violence. we must be able to disagree without being disagreeable. I want to thank Senator Hughes for including me today. It's an important message for everybody. It's not an urban issue, it's not a suburban issue, it's not a rural issue, it's an American issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. Please welcome the chair of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, Representative Donna Bullock.
Thank you, Senator Hughes, and thank you to all of my colleagues from the General Assembly who have joined us today, our community leaders from the NAACP, ACLU, and many other organizations who are here as well. January 6th. January 6th. I repeat that because on the House floor, if I were to say those two words, my mic would be immediately cut off. I will be ruled out of order, and I'll be told that I am not on topic. The words January 6th have not been allowed to be uttered in our Capitol for the last year. Yes, January 6th was an attack on our democracy. It was an attempt to prevent the peaceful transition of power. And yes, it was very much so, a culmination, a result of a years-long campaign to suppress black and brown voters. Whenever we see in our history, and Liz from the ACLU has laid this out very eloquently, whenever black and brown folks step up and use their power to vote, we have seen an immediate response to suppress that vote. Legislative response, other responses, and at times that response has been violent. The most violent of responses in which we had seen last year. So January 6th is a day for us to remember the strength of our democracy. We made it out of that horrifying event that we all witnessed on Zoom or TV or social media. But January 6th is also a reminder that black and brown votes do matter. They do matter. For those in our communities who think that your vote does not matter, just look to January 6th. That is the response to you using your power to vote. That is the response to black and brown voters making a difference across this country in an election. That January 6th day and all of the attempts in our legislature to suppress your vote. Last time we were in the State House, one of my colleagues so bluntly said that they were trying to register certain people, and we must stop those attempts to register certain people. Senator, what certain people are they talking about? Black and brown votes, those people. But I will tell you, as we advance, and I heard Ms. Custis' instructions, advance democracy, expand democracy. We have introduced legislation in the State House, the K. Leroy Irvis voting rights bill.
Yes.
That's the kind of work we need to continue to do. And I will stand with my colleagues in Harrisburg to make sure we protect, expand, and secure the right to vote for everyone here in this Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Sharif Street. Senator.
Mr. Chairman, I'm proud to be standing with so many of my colleagues here today on a site where our not far from where our Constitution was adopted, on a site where we have the Liberty Bell, which has been a symbol of freedom, but on a site also where not far away there were 10 enslaved people of color, black people, that were held as slaves, whose rights were not granted, who never had an opportunity to vote. You know, this country has been constantly moving towards full enfranchisement. When this country was founded, white men who didn't own property, in many cases, were not allowed to vote. Women were not allowed to vote. black and brown folks were not allowed to vote. And as we've moved towards a place where more and more people are included in the process, we still have work to do. But there are some that would like to roll back the hands of time and move us back to a time when we did not have the right to vote. And there are those, even at its infancy in the civil rights movement, when we started to include more people who talked about what was then called the doctrine of interposition and nullification, which is literally in the I Have a Dream speech for Dr. King. Before he talked about the famous line about little black and little brown boys sitting together with little black and white boys and girls sitting together at the table of brotherhood, he talked about the governor of Alabama, who he said lips were dripping with the racist doctrines of interposition and nullification, which was the mere suggestion that state legislatures could set aside the votes and choose a president because the governor was upset that black and brown folks were being allowed to vote. Well, they may not be calling it nullification and interposition, but today we commemorate a day where 1 year ago, we mourn a day where 1 year ago, people advancing the ideas of interposition and nullification stormed our Capitol in the same way that Dr. King was condemning years ago in the I Have a Dream speech. They stormed the Capitol because they were not only talking about interposition and nullification, they were acting on trying to advance interposition and nullification. They wanted to nullify the votes of the people of Pennsylvania, and they have repeatedly talked about it. And why? Because they say bad things happen in Philadelphia. The only bad things that were happening to them were the fact that they did not reach out to the disenfranchised. They did not reach out to communities of color. They did not reach out to those people who had been left out of the system. And a good thing happened. Those people voted and came out in significant numbers that allowed us to duly elect Joe Biden president and Kamala Harris, the first woman and the first person of color to ever serve as vice president of the United States of America. They wished to nullify that. But in doing that, they were not only damaging, they not only sought to damage the democracy for people of color, but to damage it for us all. Because it is our right to vote and our peaceful transition of power that allows us to have the stability that we all enjoy, that allows this country to continue to get better without shedding blood. So we remember today all those people who righteously shed blood trying to advance this country, who were peacefully protesting and were attacked. And we condemn the horrible acts of attacking the Capitol violently to try and advance a doctrine that most of us thought was long gone. So Dr. King had a dream, and we still are dreaming, that there will be a time when we can all peacefully come together. But we are moving forward, and we are not going back. And so today we call upon law enforcement. We support the folks who are doing the good work in Congress to hold the former president accountable for his actions and hold all those others who are responsible, some of whom serve in the legislature in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, responsible as well. We asked that the process of government move forward. But we also have to call on Congress to do the good work to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, so we can continue to make sure that people in this Commonwealth and all over the country have a right to vote. We ask that districts make sure that there's an inclusion of people of color. And we ask that each and every person, regardless of race, creed, national origin, sexual orientation, where they were born, have their rights protected in our democracy. We must protect the hard-fought ground that we have come forward with. And we must not stop doing the work to advance our country, this Commonwealth, and this city to become the more perfect union that so many people have dreamed of it to be. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Thank you.
Center Street. We will now hear from our two council members, Councilmember Derek Green, and then followed to that, the shy and retiring Council Member Helen Gim. Councilman.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. And, you know, as I was listening to all of the great partners that are here today and their comments, and they touched on so many important parts and points, it made me reflect on the fact that not only am I a member of City Council, but I'm a strong lover of cities based on my experience as a past president of the Pennsylvania Municipal League and current president of the Democratic Municipal Officials. So not only did we have an attack on our democracy, we had an attack on an American city. And that's something that should never occur in these United States. And as we sit here right at the ground where we have the National Constitution Center in my front, Independence Hall in the back, and I think about what both Senator Street and Representative Bullock said, the peaceful transfer of power. That is what this country is known for. Nations around the world have looked to the United States for the peaceful transfer of power. And that almost did not happen because of an attack on American city and an attempted coup on our government. And so when I think about right in front of me, the National Constitution Center, and I'm looking at Civil War and Reconstruction, we are going through a new Jim Crow. And when Representative Bullock made the statement about what one of her colleagues said, and I think about we the people, some are trying to say not we the people, but only some people can be part of this government and part of this democracy. And someone like me should not have the opportunity to vote or be an elected official. That's why it's so important that we remember what happened 1 year ago. Because people are already trying to act like it was just one day in January, or that we've got to do the big lie and help protect voting rights when we're actually trying to take away voting rights for so many people that look like me in this country. And I will close by saying this. November 10th, 1898. Many people don't know what that date represents. That's why we need to be here to make people remember what happened 1 year ago. Because on November 10th, 1898, we had an attack on another American city in an actual coup, where duly elected African Americans and others who were part of a Wilmington City Council and mayor were thrown out of office violently, and there was an actual coup in an American city in these United States. But many people don't remember November 10th, 1898 and what happened in Wilmington. That's why we have to be here today and every day to never, never, never let anyone forget what happened 1 year ago, because an attempted coup could happen once again. Thank you.
The shy and retiring. Helen Gim.
Thank you very much, Senator Hughes. Khadija and I were just at the National Constitution Center at an event about defending democracy, and I'm proud to join Senator Hughes, my colleagues at the city, state, and state level as the defenders of democracy today on this 1 year anniversary of January 6th. I think District Attorney Krasner laid it out pretty clearly. On January 6th, 2021, white supremacists, militia members, and hundreds of adherents to the former president stormed the U.S. Capitol in order to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. 9 people died in connection to the January 6th assault on the Capitol, and 150 officers were injured. And as horrifying as those events were on January 6th, the weeks and months that have followed have brought neither calm nor comfort to a nation whose democracy still teeters on a knife's edge. And on this 1 year anniversary, we are standing here together as defenders of democracy because this work is conscious, it is purposeful, it is local, and we have work to do not just to preserve our democracy, not just to defend democracy, but to breathe new life in it, to expand it, and to lift it up to meet this moment. All of us have a role to play in this work. After all, what happened at the U.S. Capitol did not start there. It had been brewing all across this nation as we become the first generation to see this nation transition into a multiracial voting majority. It is happening as there are a massive expansion of women in Congress and at the highest levels of government, and in the footsteps of the first black president of the United States. It's been brewing here in our own state of Pennsylvania, where a sitting state senator, one of your colleagues, Senator Hughes, was present in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. And it happens as more than 62 Pennsylvanians have been formally charged in the January 6th riots. It lives in the actions we've seen by our state legislature to advance efforts to impose further voting restrictions and invasive voter ID laws. But we are clear that the defenders of democracy are each and every one of us, ordinary Americans called in extraordinary time to defend our voting rights, to decry the ridiculous sham efforts to reopen the November 2020 election results, and to ensure that actually voters will decide the fate of this nation, not tyrants and not autocrats. On this somber day, the truth is that our nation and this city of liberty and history, shone on a national stage, because my strongest moment from this democracy was when Philadelphia threw the loudest, proudest dance party for America and American democracy, drowning out the hate, drowning out those bomb threats, and celebrating with a people's party in the streets. On that day, our Constitution became far more than just a historic artifact. Its words lifted off the page and moved onto the streets, defined by all of us, a people that are filled with and moved with joy, with purpose, and with vision of a nation by the people, for the people, of the people. And in the aftermath then, may our lesson be this, that we are truly, each and every one of us, the defenders of this democracy. In the aftermath, I went out to high school civic classes all over the city of Philadelphia to go on a listening tour with our young people. And they had questions that many of us are also asking. Does my vote really count? Can my voice make a difference? And the answer is yes, always yes. Because as Khadija has shown, we have an incredible outpouring of support. Young people headed to the polls in November 2020 by historic margins, and they will do so again. People of color headed to the polls by historic margins in November 2020, and then we will do so again. And here in the city of Philadelphia, I am so proud that Asian American and immigrant voting rights activists took to the streets relentlessly to ensure that people's voices would be heard, that the census would be counted. And as a result, Philadelphia hit a 5% threshold of Chinese voters and residents, and Chinese language will be on the ballot in May of 2022, and will be so going forward. That is the difference that ordinary people make when we know that this democracy is more than just voting day. It is making sure that our communities are seen and heard, and that change, power, and justice is afoot here. Thank you so much, Senator Hughes.
Thank you. I told you she didn't have much to say. She was going to be retired and just kind of held back. So we want to wrap up here. We want to thank everybody for their participation, our partners who joined very quickly. We want to thank all of our elected officials who are here also, who also joined very quickly. We're again reminded in so many respects of where this day started, in Valley Forge, and the sobering history that exists there. And if you haven't been back there, I would encourage you to make that journey back there. It is a very sobering a place when you understand what occurred there hundreds of years ago. We journeyed from there to this location purposefully. Independence Hall in the background, the National Constitution Center in front of us, the federal courthouse. I keep pointing to the federal courthouse. The federal courthouse where we expect those great and small to be prosecuted and to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. And Councilmember Gim reminded us that 62 people in Pennsylvania are already in the mix, with a number of them being from Philadelphia. To our back, on our left, is the Liberty Bell, the cracked Liberty Bell. Some want to continue for it to stay cracked and widen that fissure. Some of us want to heal it and bring it together. That's what we stand here for, to make it a more perfect union. But we make it a perfect union by participating, by never forgetting, by defending democracy, and by advancing democracy as well. So let's all retire to our different responsibilities and meetings. Let's never forget this day. Let's never forget this hour. It was sometime around this moment, Tim Carney, a year ago, where Vice President Pence was wheeled out of the Capitol, the chamber, and took the back steps out of the building with his family and security surrounding him, with, Councilman Green, that black box, the death box, if you will, the ultimate box at his side. 60 feet away were insurrectionists that could have changed everything, far more than probably they even thought about. We will never forget that. And we will work our hardest to make sure that it never happens again. Thank you all very much.